There is a photograph that Lynette Hooker sent to her family as a check-in, just a simple screenshot from a camera mounted on the boat she called home. She wanted the people she loved to know she was okay. She had no idea that buried in the top left corner of that image was a logo, a single word, that would one day become one of the most important pieces of evidence in a federal criminal investigation into her own disappearance. She had no idea that the cameras she installed on the boat she built with her own hands might one day be the only witnesses left who could speak for her. On the night of April 4, 2025, Lynette Hooker vanished from the waters of the Bahamas. Her husband, Brian, says she fell from a small dinghy and the ocean swallowed her. Her daughter, Karli, says something else entirely. And a federal investigation that has now seized the vessel at the center of everything, a sailboat named Soulmate, suggests that the truth about what happened that night may already be documented, time-stamped, and waiting on servers that Brian Hooker cannot touch. This is the story of Lynette Hooker. And if you stay until the end, you will understand exactly why the word that keeps circling this case like a tide that will not stop rising is one word: charges. If this kind of deep investigative storytelling is what you are here for, you are in the right place. Make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Records, because this case is building towards something, and when it breaks, you need to be here. Now let us go back to the beginning, because before we can understand what happened on that boat on the night of April 4th, we need to understand who Lynette Hooker was, not just as a name in a headline, not just as a missing woman, but as a person who built the life she lived with her own two hands and her own talent and her own money. Lynette Hooker was adventurous in the most literal sense of the word. She did not watch other people sail. She sailed. She did not admire the ocean from a distance. She made it her home. She practiced yoga on the deck of her boat in the mornings. When the vessel was anchored near a port town with a gym or a boot camp class, she would find it and join it. She ran alongside her daughter Karli whenever they were in the same place at the same time. She was not a passive participant in her own life. She was the architect of it. She was also a skilled seamstress. She sewed biminis, the protective canopy structures that shade the cockpit of a sailboat, not just for her own vessel, but commercially for other sailboat owners. The blue side windows visible on the exterior of Soulmate in photographs and video footage were stitched together by Lynette's own hands. The bimini on the boat she and Brian lived aboard, the one that sheltered them from the sun on every voyage, she made that too. She did not simply occupy that boat. She contributed to it materially, financially, and creatively. Soulmate was not just her husband's vessel. It was hers in every meaningful sense. She documented all of it. She shared photographs of sunsets and anchorages and quiet mornings on the water with the people who followed her online. She sent screenshots to family as check-ins, casual proof that she was alive and well and somewhere beautiful. She called the ocean her happy place. She meant it. And she had a daughter named Karli Aylesworth, who was 29 years old at the time her mother disappeared. They ran together. They called each other. They were close in the way that mothers and daughters who have weathered difficult seasons together tend to be close, with a depth that cannot be explained in a single conversation. Karli's grandmother, Darlene Hamlet, was Lynette's mother. Two women who loved Lynette completely and who, as of the time this story was documented, were living without answers in the space that her absence left behind. Brian Hooker came into Karli's life when she was approximately 4 years old. He became her stepfather. He and Lynette built the sailing life together, moving through Florida waters and down into the Bahamas on a vessel they named Soulmate. He presented publicly as a devoted husband and partner. When Lynette disappeared, he described her on Facebook as his beloved. He called the event a boat accident in unpredictable seas and high winds. He said she fell from a small dinghy and he could not save her. He said that searching for her was his sole focus. He has denied any wrongdoing. His attorneys have maintained his innocence completely and consistently. He has not been charged with any crime. Every single one of those facts matters, and every single one of them travels with this story from beginning to end. But here is what also travels with this story. 2 years before Lynette Hooker disappeared from a boat, Brian Hooker told her he would throw her overboard so that nobody could find her. That is not a suspicion. That is not a rumor. That is what Lynette told her own daughter in her own words during a visit in Florida in 2024 when the two of them were together after a breakup period between Brian and Lynette. According to Karli's account, given directly on camera to investigative reporter Brian Entin and subsequently reported by CNN and Fox News, Lynette sat with her daughter and disclosed what had been happening. She told Karli that Brian had choked her. She told Karli that he had threatened to kill her. And she told Karli that he had specifically said he would throw her overboard so that nobody could find her. Let that settle for a moment. Not overboard in the abstract. Not some vague threat of harm. A specific method. A specific location. A specific outcome. He would throw her overboard so that nobody could find her. Karli sat across from Brian Entin and said it plainly on camera. She said that 2 years before her mother vanished, Brian had already made this threat, that this exact thing was going to happen to her, that he would make sure it happened. She said he had threatened it multiple times. She said there was a history of him choking her mother out and threatening to throw her overboard. And then she said something that in its simplicity was more devastating than any legal argument. She said the fact that this is happening now makes her believe there is more to the story. In January of 2026, just 3 months before Lynette disappeared from a boat in the Bahamas, Lynette called Karli again. According to CNN reporting, Lynette told Karli during that call that Brian had threatened to throw her off their boat during a fight in 2024. 3 months before she went missing, she was still thinking about that threat, still carrying it, still telling the people she trusted. There is also a 2015 police report documenting a domestic incident involving Brian Hooker. The specific details have not been publicly disclosed in full, but the report exists. It is on record. And legal experts who have been consulted on cases of this nature are consistent in their assessment. Prior specific threats against a specific victim, describing a specific method, in a specific location where she subsequently disappeared. That is the kind of prior conduct that prosecutors document carefully and that juries weigh heavily. He threatened to throw her overboard. She disappeared from a boat. Both of those things are now on the record, on camera, in Karli Aylesworth's own words, in a publicly available interview conducted by Brian Entin. Now we go to April 4th, 2025. Because that is the night everything either happened the way Brian says it happened, or it did not. The Bahamas. Soulmate is anchored. Brian and Lynette are aboard. According to Brian's account, the two of them got into the small dinghy, the tender boat used to travel between the anchored sailboat and shore. He has described the conditions that evening as involving unpredictable seas and high winds. He says Lynette fell from the dinghy into the water. He says he could not save her. He says the ocean took her. Per the account given to Fox News Digital by Blaine Stevenson, a man described as a friend of Brian Hooker's, the incident was reported to have occurred at 7:30 in the evening. Brian came ashore at 4 in the morning. That is an approximately 8.5-hour gap between the moment Brian says his wife went into the water and the moment he reported it. Search and rescue took him back out for 3 or 4 hours, then returned him to Soulmate. He then remained on that boat, alone, for approximately 24 hours, while volunteers searched the water, while rescue teams were deployed. While Karli sat in Michigan wondering what was happening to her mother, Brian Hooker was on Soulmate. He did not return to the water to search. He did not provide investigators with new information beyond his initial account. He sent Karli a matter-of-fact voicemail, not a phone call, roughly 24 hours after the reported incident. He left the Bahamas the following day. And then there is what Blaine Stevenson said. Again, this is not a family member. This is not someone with an obvious reason to doubt Brian. This is described as Brian's friend. Stevenson told Fox News Digital that at no point did Brian really look at the situation and give anybody any more details than he had at the beginning when he was supposedly in shock. And then Stevenson asked the question out loud, a question that has no clean answer. Even if Brian accepts the fact that his wife is gone, does he not want closure? Does he not want redemption? Those are not the words of a prosecutor building a case. Those are the words of a man who knew Brian Hooker and who watched him in the days after Lynette disappeared and could not make the behavior fit the story of a grieving husband. Now contrast what Stevenson described with what Brian wrote on Facebook in the aftermath of his wife's disappearance. He wrote that he was heartbroken over the recent boat accident in unpredictable seas and high winds that caused his beloved Lynette to fall from their small dinghy. He wrote that they continued to search for her and that it was his sole focus. Sole focus. Continuing to search. According to the documented account of his own friend, he searched for 3 or 4 hours, sat on the boat alone for 24 hours, and then left the Bahamas the following day. He did not call Darlene Hamlet. He did not sit with Karli. He left. There are also witnesses who were in the area on the night of April 4th, who reported hearing a massive splash after 9:30 in the evening. That is approximately 2 hours after the time Brian says the incident occurred. There were also witnesses who reported observing a horizontal flare, a specific type of maritime distress signal. These witnesses are, per reporting, in contact with authorities. And there is the AIS data, the automatic identification system, which transmits vessel location and is generally required to be active on vessels of Soulmate's type. The documented record shows an 11-hour blackout in Soulmate's AIS data, 11 hours during which the vessel's position was not being transmitted. That kind of blackout does not happen by accident. When you hold all of that together, the 5-hour gap before Brian reported anything, the 24 hours alone on Soulmate, the voicemail to his daughter, leaving the Bahamas the next day, the witnesses who heard a splash 2 hours after the reported incident time, and an 11-hour AIS blackout. Brian Hooker's account of a terrible and tragic accident is asking you to accept a very specific version of events, and the documented record makes that version increasingly difficult to hold. Brian Hooker was detained in the Bahamas for 5 days. The Bahamian prosecutor reviewed the case at that time and determined there was insufficient evidence to file charges, releasing him pending further investigation. He returned to Michigan, where he is currently represented by attorneys who have maintained his complete innocence. And he began the process of arranging for a delivery captain to bring Soulmate back to him. He did not know what was already in motion. On May 15, 2026, the United States Coast Guard published an official news release, subsequently confirmed by military reporting. The language in that release was not accidental. It was not loosely worded. In federal law enforcement communications, every word is deliberate. And the release stated the following: Special agents with the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service, supported by multiple Coast Guard surface and aviation assets, seized the sailing vessel Soulmate, approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida, as part of an ongoing criminal investigation into the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. Read that carefully. Not a missing persons investigation, not a search and rescue operation, not a welfare inquiry, an ongoing criminal investigation. That is a specific, legally weighted choice of language. The federal government does not use the phrase active criminal investigation as a placeholder. They use it because a crime is what they believe occurred. They have opened a criminal case. They have sworn federal agents working it. And they have seized the vessel they believe is central to it. The same release described the seizure as part of a complex surveillance and interdiction operation coordinated by the Coast Guard Investigative Service and operational surface assets from Sector Miami and aviation assets from Air Station Miami. Complex surveillance and interdiction operation. Those words tell their own story. This was not improvised. They were watching. They tracked Soulmate from the air. They had surface vessels in position. They planned the interception and executed it precisely 40 nautical miles off the Florida coast. Brian Hooker, sitting in Michigan, thought he was getting his boat back quietly. He arranged for a delivery captain. He expected Soulmate to sail north and come home to him. He did not know that above that vessel, invisible and silent, a Coast Guard surveillance aircraft had already acquired it. He did not know that surface vessels from Sector Miami were already positioned. He did not know that the operation was already underway. While he waited in Michigan, federal agents intercepted his boat on the open ocean and took it into custody. Investigative reporter Brian Entin traveled to Fort Pierce, Florida, where Soulmate was subsequently docked at the Coast Guard station. He got as close as he could. He confirmed the crime scene tape surrounding the vessel. He confirmed that Coast Guard investigators had been going on and off the boat, taking photographs, examining the interior, and removing items in sealed evidence bags. The airspace above the Coast Guard base is restricted, requiring specific permissions, and Entin's crew was unable to obtain clearance in time to fly a drone. But what he confirmed on the ground was enough. He also confirmed something from a source close to the investigation, that there is a lot of movement behind the scenes, that more movement and more progress should be expected in the coming weeks. Those are not the words of a stalled case. That is not the language of an investigation running out of momentum. That is an investigation building towards something specific. Brian Entin has accompanied Coast Guard surveillance flights on 3 separate prior occasions over the years. He knows what those aerial photographs look like when they are taken from altitude, at a specific angle, from a surveillance aircraft. And the aerial photograph of Soulmate, released as part of the official documentation of the seizure, the image taken during the surveillance operation before the interception, Entin identified it as consistent with what he has personally observed during those flights. Which means the Coast Guard was tracking Soulmate from the air long before they ever made contact with it on the water. They had eyes on it the entire time. CBS News confirmed the seizure through 2 independent sources with knowledge of the investigation. And per a source briefed directly on the CGI's probe, the investigation has intensified in recent days. That word, intensified, combined with an official active criminal investigation designation, combined with a complex aerial and maritime interdiction operation, combined with crime scene tape and evidence bags and federal agents going through every inch of that vessel, that is not the portrait of a case going cold. That is the portrait of a case converging. We are now at True Crime Records, and if you have been watching this far, you already know this story is unlike anything else you have seen today. Hit the like button right now and make sure you are subscribed, because what comes next in this case, and we will cover every development, is going to matter. Now here is the part that changes everything. Because the seizure of Soulmate matters enormously. The official language matters. The surveillance operation matters. But what investigators found when they went aboard that vessel, or more precisely, what they knew to look for the moment they had it, that is where this investigation transforms from a maritime case into something that may already have its answer sitting quietly in digital storage, waiting for a federal subpoena. Let us talk about the cameras. Lynette Hooker sent her family a screenshot from a camera mounted aboard Soulmate. It was a routine check-in. She wanted the people she loved to see that she was safe, and that the boat was calm, and that everything was fine. In the top left corner of that screenshot, burned into the frame the way a watermark is burned into an image, was a single word: Blink. Blink is not a generic camera brand. Blink is a specific security camera system manufactured and distributed by Amazon. It connects to your smartphone. It uploads footage automatically to Amazon's cloud storage servers. And here is the critical detail that makes this information more than just technically interesting. You do not need an active subscription for basic footage retention. The cloud record exists, whether you actively manage it or not. Every time a Blink camera records an event, that footage goes up. It lives on Amazon servers, and it stays there. The camera identified from Lynette's screenshot was positioned at the stern of the pilot house, the covered cockpit area above deck, facing forward toward the bow. Think about what that means physically. Anyone coming aboard Soulmate from the dinghy would have to board from the stern area and move through the cockpit. That camera was pointed directly at the path anyone coming aboard would travel. If someone came back to Soulmate on the night of April 4th, that camera was in position to record them doing it. But there was a second camera, positioned at the front of the pilot house, facing aft, facing backward toward the stern. Together with the first camera, these 2 cameras covered essentially every angle of the covered cockpit area from opposite directions. The combined field of view left almost no blind spot in that space. Anyone arriving, anyone moving through, anyone present in that cockpit, both cameras would have had a record of it. How do we know about the second camera? Not from a photograph, not from a screenshot, from Karli Aylesworth, who was physically aboard Soulmate in February of 2025, 2 months before the night Lynette disappeared. When Brian Entin asked Karli about cameras on the boat, she described a camera positioned under the bimini at the front of the pilot house, facing back toward the stern. She offered this description without being prompted, without being shown any photographs, without being guided toward a particular answer. She had been on that boat 8 weeks before the night in question, and she remembered the camera, and she described it independently. That is what investigators call independent corroboration. 2 separate sources. A screenshot Lynette herself sent to family, and a first-hand account from a woman who was physically aboard the vessel 2 months before the disappearance, each confirming the presence and position of cameras on Soulmate without coordinating their accounts. And then there is a third camera, below deck, confirmed by witnesses who had spent time aboard Soulmate and who have been interviewed in connection with the investigation. Above deck, 2 cameras covering every angle of the cockpit. Below deck, at least 1 more. All of them potentially running on the night of April 4th. All of them potentially uploading to cloud storage in real time. Now, consider what Brian Hooker has said about that night. He says he and Lynette never made it back to Soulmate. He says the incident happened in the dinghy out on the water before they ever returned to the boat. He says Soulmate was sitting empty and dark from approximately 7:30 in the evening until morning. He says nobody was on it. Nothing happened on it. If that is true, and those cameras were running, they recorded an empty boat, a dark cockpit, no movement, no one coming aboard. Brian's account would be confirmed. The footage would show exactly what he described. A vessel undisturbed, sitting quietly in the dark while tragedy unfolded somewhere out on the water. But if Lynette came home to that boat, if the dinghy returned, if Brian and Lynette were on Soulmate on the night of April 4th, if something happened in that cockpit or below deck, the cameras may have recorded every second of it. And here is what makes this evidence potentially inescapable. Even if Brian Hooker went through that boat before the delivery captain arrived to sail it north, even if he deleted every local file on every device, even if he wiped the tablet connected to the Blink system, deleted the app, and removed every physical trace of the footage from the boat itself, the cloud record may already exist on Amazon's servers. Servers he cannot access. Servers he cannot erase. Servers that the Coast Guard Investigative Service, working in direct coordination with the Department of Justice, can reach with a single federal subpoena served on Amazon Web Services. Because Amazon is a United States company, and a federal subpoena served on a United States company is fully enforceable. CGI's has the boat. They have the devices. They have the means to identify every camera system aboard and the legal authority to pull the cloud records associated with each one. Whether those records show an empty vessel or something else entirely, investigators are positioned to find out. But the cameras are not the only potential witnesses aboard Soulmate. Not even close. When the original battery management system on the vessel was damaged by a lightning strike, it was replaced with a newer unit. And newer battery management systems do not simply manage battery levels. They log. They create a time-stamped record of every electrical event that occurs on the vessel. Every time a light comes on. Every time the water pump activates. Every time the hot water heater fires. Every time a device is connected to a charging port. Every single one of those events is recorded with a timestamp that cannot be retroactively altered without leaving a trace. Now remember what Karli said about her mother's habits. When Lynette returned to the boat after time in the water or ashore, she would go below deck and shower off the salt water. This was not an occasional behavior. It was a pattern, consistent and established. If Lynette came home to Soulmate on the night of April 4th, she would have gone below and showered. The water pump would have activated. The hot water heater would have fired. Both of those events would appear in the battery management log with a timestamp. And then there is the Apple Watch. Lynette wore one, but its battery was aging. According to Karli, her mother's consistent habit was to remove the watch around dinner time and place it on the charger. If that watch came off and went onto its charger aboard Soulmate on the night of April 4th, the battery log records a charging event, time-stamped. Any one of those events appearing in the system log after 7:30 in the evening on April 4th would directly contradict the account Brian Hooker has given, because he says nobody was on that boat. The battery log does not know whose story it is supposed to support. It simply records what happened. There is also the Starlink terminal, a satellite internet system mounted high on the mast of Soulmate to maximize its signal range. Here is how Starlink works in practical terms. Any device that comes within range of the terminal, any phone, any Apple Watch connected to a phone, automatically connects to the network. That connection is not something the user manually initiates. It happens because the device recognizes a known network and joins it, and that connection is logged, not on the boat, on SpaceX servers, remote servers that exist completely outside of anything Brian Hooker could touch or alter, servers accessible by federal subpoena because SpaceX is a United States company. If Lynette's phone or her Apple Watch came within range of Soulmate's Starlink terminal on the night of April 4th, that connection appears in SpaceX's logs. The timestamp is there. The duration is there. The data showing whether a device associated with Lynette Hooker connected to the network on that boat on that evening. It is either in those logs or it is not. If it is there, it has been waiting for investigators since the night it was created. And then there is the AIS blackout. 11 hours during which Soulmate's automatic identification system was not transmitting its location. On a vessel required to have AIs active, an 11-hour gap is not a technical anomaly. It is a question that demands an answer. What was happening during those 11 hours that the vessel's position was not being broadcast? Who made the decision to stop transmitting? And when, exactly, did that blackout begin relative to 7:30 in the evening on April 4th? When you stack all of that together, the camera footage potentially existing in cloud storage, the battery management log recording every electrical event with a timestamp, the Starlink records on SpaceX, servers showing whether Lynette's devices connected to the boat's network that night, and the AIS blackout that raises its own urgent questions. What you have is not a single piece of digital evidence. What you have is a network of overlapping systems, each independent of the others, each maintaining its own record, each potentially telling the same story from a different angle. And CGI's has investigators specifically trained in maritime crime. They know how these systems work. They know where the data lives. They know which subpoenas to file and which servers to contact and what they are looking for when they get the records back. They are not guessing. They are not hoping. They are pulling information from systems that were never designed to hide what they know. Now, there is something that has not received enough attention in the coverage of this case, and it matters in a way that is separate from the technical evidence. It matters because it speaks to who Brian Hooker is in the days since Lynette disappeared, not just on the night of April 4th. Karli Aylesworth is 29 years old. She has been thinking, in the days and weeks since her mother vanished, about what kind of deal she might one day offer the man who raised her from the time she was 4 years old. When Brian Entin asked her whether she believes Brian will ever tell the full truth, she said they are thinking of eventually giving him an ultimatum. Tell us where she is, and maybe less sentencing if he gets sentenced. But she doubted he would take it, because there is still a chance he could get away with it. Notice what she said. Not tell us what happened. Tell us where she is. Karli has already reached her own conclusion about what happened on the night of April 4th. The question she is living with now is not about the event. It is about the location. She does not believe her mother is in the ocean. She believes Brian Hooker knows where Lynette is. And she is 29 years old, thinking about what she could trade, reduced sentencing, the possibility of a deal, in exchange for the location of her mother's body. Brian has attempted to contact Karli since returning to Michigan. She has declined to respond. He has not called Darlene Hamlet, Lynette's mother, beyond the early days of the investigation. Not once. Think about what that means. If Brian's account of a terrible accident is true, he is also a person who lost someone. He would be grieving. And the thing that a grieving innocent person does, the thing that any innocent man would do, is reach toward the people who are also grieving. He would call the mother-in-law. He would be present for the daughter. He would be the loudest voice demanding that investigators find Lynette and bring her home. He is in Michigan, behind 2 attorneys, silent. He is not searching. He is not calling. He is not demanding answers. He is waiting. Now let us talk about the federal investigation itself, and specifically about what the language coming out of this case tells us about where it is heading. Because there is a way to read federal law enforcement communications that most people have not been taught. And once you understand it, what CGI has said publicly takes on a meaning that is impossible to misread. When the federal government uses the phrase active criminal investigation, they are not using it loosely. They are not using it as a bureaucratic default. They are using it because that is the accurate legal description of what they have opened. A criminal case, with sworn agents working it, with a chain of custody being established on evidence, with a vessel in federal custody that they believe is central to a crime. The official release described the operation that seized Soulmate as a complex surveillance and interdiction operation. Those words, complex, surveillance, interdiction, describe a planned, coordinated, multi-asset federal operation that required intelligence gathering before it could be executed. You do not conduct a complex surveillance and interdiction operation on a hunch. You conduct one when you have already built enough of a picture to justify mobilizing aviation and surface assets across two separate operational bases. CGIs had been watching before they moved. And when they moved precisely. Per CBS News, two independent sources with knowledge of the investigation confirmed the seizure. Per a source briefed on the probe, the investigation has intensified in recent days. Per the source Brian Entin cited with knowledge of events behind the scenes, more movement and more progress in the coming weeks should be expected. That is 3 separate indications from 3 separate sourced accounts that this investigation is not stalling. It is building, and federal investigations of this nature build quietly, methodically, toward a single moment. Federal prosecutors, particularly those working with CGIs and the Department of Justice on maritime criminal cases, do not bring a case until they are ready to win it. The documented federal conviction rate for cases brought by the Department of Justice is above 95%. They collect everything. They analyze everything. They establish an airtight chain of custody on every piece of evidence. And when they are ready, they move. The current silence out of CGIs is not the silence of an investigation with nothing to say. It is the silence of an investigation that is not finished saying it yet. The cameras are on that boat right now. The battery management log is in that boat right now. The Starlink records are on SpaceX servers right now. The Amazon cloud storage potentially containing footage from the Blink camera system is on servers right now. The AIS data showing an 11-hour blackout already exists. The witnesses who heard a massive splash after 9:30 on the night of April 4th are in contact with authorities. The 2015 police report documenting a domestic incident is on record, and Karli Aylesworth's direct on-camera account of the specific threat Brian Hooker made to throw Lynette overboard where nobody could find her is publicly documented in Brian Entin's interview, which is available for investigators, prosecutors, and juries to watch. Brian Hooker has not been charged. His attorneys have maintained his innocence. Those facts are real and they matter and they belong in this story every time without exception. The Bahamian prosecutor found insufficient evidence to charge him at the time of his 5-day detention and released him pending further investigation. All of that is true, and Lynette Hooker has been missing for over 40 days. Here is what Karli said when Brian Entin asked her to tell him about her mother. She said she is very adventurous. She loved to sail around and experience new things. She was also very crafty. She liked to sew. She sewed biminis for sailboats for people. She did a lot for her boat, and she loved to exercise. She did yoga on the boat, and if there was a workout place around, she would go join their boot camp or something. She said they ran together a lot. Karli's boyfriend Steve said something that stayed with people who heard it. He said Karli's birthday was 1 week before Mother's Day. She spent both without her mother and without answers. Back to back. Her birthday and then Mother's Day. 2 days that are supposed to be about the people who raised you, and both of them spent in the absence of any explanation for where her mother went. Lynette sewed the bimini on that boat herself. She sewed the windows. She built that life with her own hands and her own talent and her own money. She chose the ocean because she loved it. She called it her happy place. And she sent a screenshot to her family as a check-in. A simple, ordinary act of love. The kind of thing you do because you want the people who care about you to know you are okay. And in the corner of that image was a logo, a single word, Blink. She did not know what that logo meant in the context of what would come. She did not know that the cameras she put on the boat she called home might one day be the most important witnesses in a federal criminal investigation. She was just checking in. She was just letting people know she was alive and well and somewhere beautiful. Those cameras may now be the thing that speaks for her when she cannot speak for herself. They may be the thing that finally tells the truth about what happened on the night of April 4th. And CGI's has the boat. They have the devices. They have the legal authority and the investigative training to find every piece of data that boat contains or ever transmitted to a server. Soulmate is sitting at the Fort Pierce Coast Guard station right now, wrapped in crime scene tape, surrounded by federal agents who are going through every inch of it. Brian Hooker is in Michigan behind 2 attorneys, silent. Karli is waiting. Darlene is waiting. And somewhere in the architecture of digital systems that Brian Hooker may never have fully considered, in Amazon's cloud, on SpaceX's servers, in the time-stamped log of a battery management system, installed after a lightning strike, the answer to what happened on a Bahamian night in April of 2025 may already exist, recorded and preserved, waiting for the moment when investigators are ready to present it. We do not know if charges are coming. No one outside of CGI's and the Department of Justice knows that. But the trajectory of this investigation, the official language used to describe it, the complexity of the federal operation that seized the vessel, the digital evidence being systematically pulled from systems that were never designed to stay silent, and the documented threat that was made to a woman who then disappeared in exactly the way she was threatened. All of it points in one direction. Lynette Hooker called the ocean her happy place. She documented every beautiful day on the water for the world to see. She sewed the canopy that shaded the boat she shared with the man she married. And the cameras she put aboard that boat, the ones whose footage may now be sitting on servers waiting for a federal subpoena, those cameras she never thought of as protection. She was just trying to keep the boat safe. She was just living her life. They may now be the thing that brings her justice. If this case has stayed with you the way it has stayed with us, please share this video with someone who needs to know about Lynette Hooker. And if you are not already a part of this community, subscribe to True Crime Records right now. We cover every development in cases like this one from the beginning all the way through. And when something breaks in this investigation, we will be here with every detail. Like this video if Lynette's story matters to you. Because getting the truth about what happened on that boat in the Bahamas in April of 2025 starts with making sure as many people as possible know her name, Lynette Hooker. She is missing, and the cameras aboard the boat she called home may be the last witnesses who can still tell us exactly what happened the night she disappeared.